let's use as the epigraph of my talk the beautiful words from Friedrich Nietzsche and Thus Spoke Zarathustra. The world is deep, deeper than day can comprehend. I love that poetically condensed sentence because, of course, he's right away implying something more, in William James's terms, a depth dimension. It's the depth dimension of the psyche, depth psychology. In many ways, comes out of Nietzsche's turn, and Freud and Jung, deeply influenced by Nietzsche. And it's also suggests it's the depth of what can only be understood with something more than the day consciousness. The day is the light of common day, to use Wordsworth's beautiful term from Intimations of Immortality. It's the light of reason. It's the light of the solar logos. It's the light of the Enlightenment. Something more, and Nietzsche's grasping that the world requires both night and day consciousness. Both the, in a sense, you're experiencing what you're hearing in his voice. There is the romantic part of Nietzsche. He's inherited the Enlightenment so strongly that critical, rational intelligence is honed with tremendous acuity in Nietzsche. But he's also got this profound, driven depth of soul, and that's what Romanticism carries. This isn't, when I say he's romantic, it's not small r romantic like Moon and June and I want to hold your hand. It's romantic, capital R, Romanticism of Goethe and Rousseau, of Blake and Wordsworth and Coleridge and Emerson and Margaret Fuller, and right up to the 60s counterculture, Bay Area, hotbed of Romanticism. That's that tradition, which in a sense modernity is, the modern self is loyal to two great modern traditions, and that's the dialectic or tension that's at present in Nietzsche and it's present in all of us. One of them is, in a sense, we could put it this way: the modern mind is loyal to the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution, rationalist Enlightenment, John Locke, Newton to Einstein to the great rational philosophers of David Hume, Bertrand Russell, etc. Your standard science paper today reflects that legacy. But the modern soul is loyal to Romanticism. Romanticism is what has carried the poetic, the spiritual, the imaginative, the participatory, unitive soul dimension of human experience. And because the Enlightenment scientific revolution was so powerful in shaping the cosmology, shaping the worldview of the modern self, it has essentially restricted Romanticism, the romantic validity, to the interior, to the subject, and it rules in the Enlightenment scientific revolution. Modern mind rules the world, the objective world, and because objective has such power, subjective is seen as subjectively relativistic. It becomes unmoored, it becomes ungrounded in a larger reality, and it suddenly places in question everything from our religious traditions to our spiritual experiences of nature. All those can suddenly seem, well, that's just subjective. So that was the powerful dialectic that was at work in Nietzsche, and it's been at work for the whole last century very, very strongly. Okay, so if we let's look back now at the larger 2,500 year Western evolution and set out some big fence posts here. You could say, but be very simple about it, to the point of simplistic. I mean, those of you who've read Passion of the Western Mind or anything else that I've written know that I attempt to be faithful to the complexities and nuances of this material. But we've got a short time, and so we'll be very general here. You could say that the Western tradition, the interior of Western civilization, has been essentially shaped by two root streams that begin respectively in ancient Greece and ancient Israel. More generally, those would be called the Greco-Roman and Judeo-Christian traditions. Keeping in mind that those two hyphens, particularly the latter, the Judeo-Christian one, are highly controverted because that can seem to elide important differences and tyrannical colonization and so forth. Same thing could be true said of the Greco-Roman too. What's interesting is the extent to which, as I think it was Horace who said, after the Roman, it good to get exactly said it so much better, but it was something like the Greeks captured the Romans, their minds, and there's a certain underlying unity or an underlying coherent impulse at work in both Judaism and Christianity in the West, which involves not only an ethical monotheism, but also a highly prophetic and historically shaped, historically focused sense of divinity. If we were to take these two traditions and again make a huge kind of generalization, you could say that that coming out of ancient Greece and like the great philosophers in particular, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and the larger gestalt of philosophy, that they are the Mount Everest of. You could say that in a certain way, what was forged in the Greek crucible was the autonomous human intelligence that was in some sense rooted in and reflective of an experience of divinity as a cosmic mind, a universal intelligence, a transcendent reason that manifested itself in the celestial order, in the cosmos, which, as you probably know, cosmos itself means this combination of order, pattern, beauty that is so essential to the Greek vision. Probably the Pythagoreans, maybe even Pythagoras, was the first to use cosmos in that way. By contrast, you could say that the Judaic and then Christian, what was forged in that tradition was the autonomous human will, that was the moral sensibility that was rooted in and reflective of an experience of divinity as being a transcendent divine will that acted in and through history to transform it, to move it towards its consummation, that that acts in human affairs through, it brings manna from the heavens, it brings water out of rocks, it brings new birth out of death, life out of the tomb. And those two root streams come together in the course of the later classical era. A series of figures play a crucial role. St. Paul, huge role, being Greek by education, and Roman by citizenship, and Jewish by religious upbringing and sensibility. And he's huge. You see it in John's Gospel with those opening words of, in the beginning was the Logos. Right away with the word Logos, you've got a term that is pulling from the two traditions. Logos as divine reason, and Logos as the creative word of God. Greek and Hellenic and Hebrew, to use the two terms beginning with the same letter. And the crucial person in whose psyche and sensibility was forged the next 1,000 years, in many ways, of Western intellectual and spiritual consciousness, was St. Augustine. And this incredible man, highly conflicted and extremely, well-educated, deeply articulate, deeply introspective. There's something that's very modern about him, something that's very postmodern about him, something that's very medieval about him, and something that's very ancient about him. He's got all these things in him in a certain way. And he so powerfully absorbs the conflicting streams of his time, Gnosticism and skepticism and Christianity and Platonism and rhetoric. And he's a professor at a Roman Empire university. And he somehow goes through such a powerful transformation and absorbs all these conflicting impulses that he is able to bring forth a synthesis, highly problematic, but extremely powerful and committed, that goes on to shape the underlying structure and impetus of the medieval mind, right up through from his time to the 5th century to the 15th century. He's so present in somebody like Luther 1,000 years later, Petrarch. He's in the background of the Renaissance, the Reformation, etc. But he's also so profoundly structuring the gestating Western mind that comes through the monasteries and then the universities in the High Middle Ages.